Good afternoon. My name is Keith McFarland. I'm a senior manager with the Salesforce CSIRT team. I've been a manager of the team for the last 18 months. Within that role, I've been the lead for the incident response function within the Amherst region. We're a Follow the Sun team. Prior to that, I was an incident responder on our team for about 3 years. So for about the last 5 years, I've been responding to the gauntlet of incidents that is Salesforce or the acquisition environments. This is also my first time presenting, so I appreciate everyone's opportunity. And this is Kelly.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly McCracken. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Detection and Response Program at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for about 7.5 years now. I've been leading our incident response program the entire time, starting in a role very similar to Keith's before I took over the global CSIRT and then built it into the Salesforce Security Response Center. The Salesforce Security Response Center includes the global CSIRT, our security triage and reporting team, which does our monitoring and triage, our product vulnerability response team, and then also our customer-owned incident response team. Prior to Salesforce, I was at Mandiant for a few years doing incident response assessments and helping customers build their incident response programs. And then I spent many years as a government contractor supporting the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team. Before we get into our presentation, I wanted to provide you an overview of Salesforce so you understand what Keith and I are responsible for defending every day. Salesforce has about 77,000 employees and 150,000 customers globally around the world. And we power trillions of platform, consumer, and employee interactions that transform businesses and people's lives daily. We hold lots of data. We're probably holding your data, we're holding my data, we're definitely holding Keith's data as well. And that means that we need to make sure that we're keeping that data secure. We maintain that trust of our customers. At Salesforce, stagnancy is not an option, and we must grow and innovate. And how we grow is through acquisitions. Since 2006, we have acquired over 70 companies, such as Tableau, MuleSoft, and most recently Slack. Today, we're going to use one of our business units that had a security incident recently as our case study. That business unit was acquired years ago, and it's called Heroku. So why are we here? At Salesforce, we believe that it's important for us to give back to our community, and that means that we're giving back to our security community with the lessons that we have learned from our incidents. We're all in this together. We all need to be making sure that we're sharing our lessons learned so that we can all work together to defend against the threats of today. Our recent security incident within Heroku received some praise, but it also had some criticism. And we learned from that criticism, which is what we want to share with you. Trust is our #1 value. And that means that we need to be transparent with our customers when there is a security event that occurs that impacts them. However, being transparent and putting an incident publicly on the internet does put our customers at risk at times. You have to be careful about what you're sharing, because if the threat actor is still within your environment, you're tipping your hand to them. And we all know that security investigations take a long time. You're often trying to follow breadcrumbs, and you're leaving no stone unturned. This can take days, weeks, sometimes even months, depending on the incident. And you need to consider, how do you communicate to your customers while you're going through this investigation?
Responding to security incidents in a world of transparency is hard. There's long been an adage in security that in an ideal world, we do full scoping and our investigation before we took containment actions. This is done so that if the actor does have anything that they're not aware of it, we could just cut off their access in one fell swoop. They don't have a mechanism to maintain persistence, create new accounts, et cetera. But in the shared services model, that changes a little bit. Within Heroku, it changes in the sense of we have to notify our customers earlier than we can even do a full investigation, because they have different impact based on how they use the platform, and they need to assess their own impact. So we're going to get into that a bit today, but we know that in doing that, we're also tipping off the actor. A little background on Heroku for those that don't know. Heroku is a platform as a service product, so it's basically up a level from AWS. The simplest way to think about it is RCE as a service, remote code execution. So you can push Python code, any type of code you want, and it'll run inside of a dyno, which is basically a container. And it's segmented off, it runs by itself, but it's an easier way to deploy code than having to stand up AWS infrastructure with all the back end and doing security groups, et cetera. One of the most common ways that people go ahead and push this code is via GitHub. So as a result of that, we store an OAuth token so that we can connect to our customers' GitHub repos. Now we get into the incident. So on April 13th, it was about 8:30 Eastern time, our local time, we were notified by GitHub of two different things. First off, this was an email that just said, we need to talk to you, which is never a good way to start a conversation. Our APAC team took the call, and the two things that were communicated were, first off, all of those OAuth tokens that we use for an integration were leveraged to enumerate and basically say, what org is this token for? The second thing that we were notified of is that a personal access token for an employee had been used to download internal Salesforce source code, specifically Heroku source code. So neither of those things are very good at first glance, and we get the alert, and we triage it the same as anything. We try to figure out if there's kind of an organic explanation, a system batch job, but there were many things within it that we were pretty clearly identified that this was not expected behavior. Some of the things that were relevant to that was that the owner of the PAT I mentioned, the personal access token, was on PTO, and the PAT is for a service that we didn't use any longer. So that was kind of where we came into things. As we went through the investigation, it became more clear, but at this point we were very unclear because there were a lot of data points at different companies. It wasn't, okay, Salesforce has everything. It was GitHub has some information, Salesforce has some information, and we later learned there's other third parties with other information. So how are these pieces related was our first 48.
So when you go to communicate transparently, it's as our presentation title said, it's a bittersweet symphony. GitHub gave us our notification that something was going on and that GitHub OAuth token had been compromised. We then needed to partner with them not only in the investigation, but we also need to partner with them on our notification. They had done their own investigation, and they had a lot of details there, and we have been working on our own investigation as well. So we partnered with them by connecting our communications functions together. We worked with their security leadership, their CSIRT, and their public relations team. And then on the Salesforce side, we had our public relations, legal, security response communications, security leadership, and business unit leadership all working on our customer notification. We knew within the first 48 hours, once we identified what was going on, that we had to take an extreme containment action quickly to protect our customers' data. We had to disconnect GitHub from Heroku. And this action was going to be impacting our customers as they were no longer going to be able to push that code from GitHub into Heroku in an automated fashion. We did have a manual workaround for them, but that was going to take them taking action on their side in order to make that work. So we partnered with GitHub on the communications, making sure that everything aligned, and then on the timing. So as the status message you see here, we had agreed that we would have Salesforce post first. Before we posted, we shared what we were sharing with them and made sure that they were aligned. And then we posted our notification first. They then posted their blog post and linked to our status post. That allowed their customers to know that they knew where to go on Heroku to get more information regarding our investigation as we progressed. Once they had posted their blog post, we sent our email to our customers notifying them of the security incident. When we did this, we provided a link to the GitHub blog post, so that the customers knew they could get the information regarding GitHub's investigation as they updated their blog as they continued their investigation. And then we thought we were going to be done there because we have notified our customers. But then we decided to take a more transparent action and go ahead and post the email that we were sending to our customers on our status page. This was a very transparent approach because we have now said what we know, everything that we knew at that point, and we've also said what our initial plan is to contain the incident. I will have to admit, being in incident response for many years, this kind of freaked me out. I've always been told, don't tip your hand to the threat actor. because now they know that you have detected them and they could change what their plan is. So not only have we tipped our hand, but we've told them what we know, and we also told them what we're doing. So I was a little bit nervous about this, but it was the right move because we were able to get the information out broader and protect our customers quicker.
At the time of this communication, we were only communicating the what. We didn't know the how or why. I think we've all kind of seen some of these polished, buttoned-up blogs that companies put out after they've done an investigation for however long, and they can kind of say everything that happened with certainty. At this stage, we really had none of that. Again, we were just communicating the what. The difficulty that we had from an incident response function with this approach is that it changed the internal pressure. Our customers had the same questions that really we had at this time, and we were getting pressure and questions from our support team and our account reps. This ultimately came to our CSIRT team as a result because if you want a question answered, the person closest to the question is probably going to have the answer, which is our team. And so we were dealing with a lot of diplomatic assuring of account and salespeople or customers at the time saying, yes, we're working on it. We don't have that answer. There's also been kind of the running joke about Fridays and holidays in security. That was this incident for us. So as you can see, April 13th was a Wednesday. That's when we got our notification. That was that night. That Friday was Good Friday, and Sunday was Easter. So we had many people that were off. As I mentioned, the employee whose personal access token was leveraged was on PTO. We had other relevant parties that we were trying to get a hold of who were also already on PTO, largely because their kids were on PTO. So what this led to was a skills gap in subject matter experts in different areas. We also had people coming up on PTO, including myself. So I was the incident commander for about the first week, but then I had a timely vacation on April 21st, about a weekend. So we had to plan for that as we were responding. This Friday notification led to a little bit of friction. There's always kind of that perception that you want to blame the person who's notifying you of something on a Friday and making you work that weekend, even if it's not necessarily their fault. So that was just something we had to deal with throughout the process.
So Fridays are not ideal. I really try not to have to send a notification on a Friday. I don't like receiving them, and neither does Keith, because you know the person that's receiving it is going to have to work that weekend. They're going to have to assess the impact to their organization, and doing it on the holiday weekend was also not ideal. But we did receive praise for doing so, and it was the right decision because we were taking that containment action of disconnecting GitHub to Heroku that night. So we needed to inform our customers in order to ensure that they weren't breaking anything. When we we worked the entire weekend, but on Monday, when we received a report from our public relations team regarding all the social media reactions and the press that we had received, they would say it was neutral. I would say it was good because we were seeing a lot of praise for going ahead and notifying and being transparent and doing this even on a Friday when we knew that it was like horrible timing for everyone. So I was feeling really good about our communications and our plan and our response to this incident come Monday morning. However,
the critics started chirping with a later notification. So again, we had mentioned that initial action about on Friday, April 15th. That was the severing of our connection to GitHub. Most of the interactions and updates that we provided after that were largely business continuity related or assessment of impact. So we had directed employees to GitHub to try and get relevant logs or to see if they were impacted in another way, specifically if like a repo had been cloned rather than just enumerated. Also, how to work around the fact that we weren't allowing GitHub to push because we had to investigate how they were able to get there to begin with. So we ultimately had an update sent on May 3rd, and this was the ominous password reset email that we emailed customers for. Now, what we made a mistake for here is we recommended an action without providing the logic or confidence behind it. This led to interpretation, which is always an issue because it can mean many things. As we'll discuss, former employees will chime in on how things work also on Hacker News, which doesn't help. But one of the things that you could do that really helps is explain what the action is related to. So in this case, it was just hashed and salted passwords that an actor would have had the capability to access, but we didn't have definitive evidence, which led to us stating another ominous no evidence of, which further led to interpretation. And that can become anything based on the reader to you have no idea what you're doing, or you just know everything and don't want to tell us. So that became another kind of public perception aspect of our incident response function. As we were going through our incident response and working on our communications, we were real-time feeding this all in, and we were really meticulously trying to work on how we communicated, trying to use that minimum effective dose of not trying to give the threat actor too much, trying to get containment and impact assessed for our customers, et cetera.
So we had some lessons learned, and some of these lessons we did apply in the middle of the incident, and others we have taken forward for future incidents. First of all, be transparent up front. State what you know and what your plan is. Lay out how you plan to update your customers, the timeline that you plan on updating your customers, and what they can expect to hear from you. Stay away from those no status updates. Customers don't like them. Some organizations do them and their customers expect it. This was not something that was expected from Salesforce, as we typically had not done no status updates in the past, but we did with this incident. Second, consider that when you email something, it is going to go public. That was one of the reasons why we made the decision at the beginning to go ahead and post that full email to our status page, because we knew that it was going to end up online anyways. So we went ahead and posted it, which was the right thing to do. However, there are times that you have to communicate privately with those that are impacted before you go and tell the whole world. And you have to do that because when we're in the shared security model, which we are at Salesforce, our customers have to take actions on their side to protect themselves as well, that we cannot take on behalf of them. So when we went to communicate privately, we put in our communications, please do not share this communication outside of your organization because you are putting yourself at risk and our other customers at risk. However, every single email that we sent during that incident ended up on the internet. So what do you do knowing that when you send an email, it's going to go public? You have to start thinking about what protections, other security controls you can put in place that could reduce the risk for your customers. You're probably not going to get rid of all the risk, but you can try to help reduce it depending on what you're asking them to do. And also, put some detections in place. If there's a way that you can put detection in place to see if your customers are being impacted before they're able to take the action you need them to take, do that so that you can at least detect that something is happening and inform them. Third is consider the way things are interpreted. As Keith was talking about, the words matter. People are going to hang on to every single word that you put in your notification. And it's important that you are being direct regarding what happened and the steps you are taking. As Keith mentioned with the former employees, we had former employees going on social media and talking to press and speculating what was really going on because they didn't feel that we were providing enough information in our posts regarding the investigation and the real impact that we were seeing. What this causes is customers get really concerned that Salesforce is not being, or Heroku, is not being transparent with their communications, or that and that they cannot trust us anymore. It also provides for a lot of confusion with all the speculation. The fourth is an investigation strategy. Going public impacts your investigation strategy. That day that we went public with this incident, we immediately had to adjust how we were going to respond on the CSIRT side. We also had to figure out what types of things are we going to do to ensure that we can still detect the threat actor if they change their, what they were doing in our environment. It definitely complicates the strategy, and it does add an additional burden to your incident response team when you go public and you share as much information by being transparent. When you do go public, make sure that you are, again, putting the detections in place based on the known IOCs and the TTPs of the threat actor, so that you can detect if they are coming back into your environment or moving around in your environment. Consider if you need to implement additional capability. So if you are in charge of a detection and response program and you have capabilities that you did not think at the time that you necessarily need it, or they were not the highest priority item for you to implement within your environment, they might now become the highest priority. And so you're not only responding to an incident, you're also deploying additional capability within your environment that's important so that you can, again, detect and respond to the ongoing threat within your environment during that incident. And then also, you're hardening. You're hardening your environment based on what you've learned during the investigation, while you're also trying to eradicate the threat actor. So all these things are important to think about as you are, when you're going to go public and have to still continue to investigate the incident. The fifth one is communicate to your customers in a way that they trust. So at Salesforce, we have a concept called security contact. And a lot of SaaS vendors have this, where you can register your security team's email address, whether it's an alias or specific contacts, with the SaaS vendor so that we can contact you directly, the security team, to notify you if there's a security event impacting you. Without having a security contact, we have to default to the application admins, which could be dozens of people in your organization that really don't understand what the email is that's coming to them, or the impact to the organization and what they're supposed to do with it. Consider the brand and look and feel of your email. Send the email regarding a security issue with the same look and brand and feel that your customers know. We did this by posting our initial notification to status.heroku.com. We didn't post it to our trust.salesforce.com because the Heroku customers are used to the Heroku brand. However, in the middle of the incident, there was one email we decided to send through Salesforce. And that email caused a lot of angst with our customers because they're now wondering, why is Salesforce sending me an email about Heroku? Now, this probably isn't a problem for a lot of organizations if you're not like Salesforce where we acquire a lot, but customers at that point, some customers didn't even know that Heroku was owned by Salesforce, so they learned it that day. But they also were, heightened alert because they already know there's an incident going on in Heroku, and now they're receiving an email from Salesforce. It really confused them, and it caused a lot of churn, especially on social media and the press. We went ahead and, once we found out that it was causing confusion, posted it to status.heroku.com, stating, we have sent an email from salesforce.com, and it can be trusted. Also, make sure, because of issues like that, you may have a reason why you can't send from your actual email send system that you're used to sending from. So make sure you have a backup mechanism to send communications to your customers regarding security events in the event that your primary doesn't work. And make sure you communicate that to your customers so you don't cause the confusion. So we learned a lot of these lessons, as I said, during the incident, and we immediately started to apply them. We started strong, as I said, on the first weekend, and I was very happy with where we stood on the 18th. And then we continued to post every single day. And each of those posts said something different, but they were all pretty much the same. It was all saying, we're continuing our investigation, and here's how you can reconnect your GitHub to Heroku in a manual fashion. This frustrated customers. We received feedback from customers that they were tired of seeing that we're continuing to investigate and that there was no substantial information. So we decided at the beginning of May that we would stop the daily status updates. We would start with, we posted a blog at the beginning of May stating what we had known at that time, everything that we had found in our investigation, and that we would no longer be posting on a daily status update unless there was something substantial to share with our customers. So from then on, we only post it when there was something substantial, and we also committed that we would complete our investigation by May 30th based on our investigation strategy and our plan that we had laid out. Customers seemed to be a lot more amenable to this type of status post versus receiving updates every day. We obviously were continuing to investigate around the clock on this incident, and at least we had set expectations for our customers as to when they would get an update, when we would finish, and then once we've completed our investigation, we provided an update on May 31st stating that we would then publish a final incident review on June 14th via our blog, which we did. In the end, our customers were a lot more satisfied with this type of update.
Anything you don't do during the preparation phase of incident response, you'll end up doing as part of your incident response process. So within Heroku, it was a little bit of a different situation for us because it was a very localized team. Almost everyone was in the United States and Canada. They couldn't support a 24-hour response, especially when we knew it was going to run for a while. Similar to that, we knew that they needed rest, and very quickly, we knew that we had to build out the team and capability and response functions so that we could continue that response, including standing down efforts to respond for certain hours so that people could recover. These people were also all from engineering and people we didn't interact with on a regular basis. So they didn't even know what things like attorney-client privilege were, how we leveraged it, why it was relevant, or TLP red, TLP amber, TLP white, et cetera. So these became discussion points on our incident bridge as we continued to work. The comms team, we definitely recommend having your own communications team. If you don't, it will become an incident responder's job during the incident. When I first joined at Salesforce, the incident responder would write the talking points or the communication to our customer. And one of the things we did for fun was open up Google Docs after they wrote it and watch a lawyer who went to Harvard just dunk on them. So that's why you want to have a communication team. The process, as you'll see on the next slide, is pretty complicated. It sounds simple, but it's not as simple as drafting a communication and sending it. There's a lot more to it. Finally, prioritize keeping customers safe because it's an asymmetric risk. Within the context of this incident, on April 15th, what we had to lose was basically just some reputational risk. But I think we earned that back by being transparent. Inversely, our customers had a lot to gain. By that communication, they could investigate if they had a repo that had secrets that led to sensitive data, they could immediately begin running their containment before they got to a stage where they had ransomware or lateral movement or just any type of activity on their network that was more significant. Also, we had a lot of new execs in this environment from the product team. So you want to train product and engineering teams, executives, as they get onboarded. If you don't, you'll spend incident bridges hearing how their last company did something rather than executing on your own process. And that's not really the time or place for you to have that discussion. So finally, make it actionable. From everything we've said, you're going to want to have, again, hopefully ideally a comms team yourself, creating templates, the approval matrix, the cadence you want to notify on, and the triggers to notify. One of the things that we come across a lot is we acquire an environment and they don't have a way to communicate to their customers. They either don't have a list of users, email addresses, who the relevant people are, or they don't have a technical means to do that notification. They don't know whether it's an email, a blog post, or they just put it as a banner on their app when people log in. So that's one of the key things that people should investigate how to do because it's a lot more difficult than it sounds at first glance. And as we've mentioned, messaging is so important. A lot of our products cater to different people, and Heroku is a good example of that. Heroku is a lot of just kind of normal people who are learning rather than businesses. And so you need to cater that communication to that. Additionally, with a lot of products, especially if you work in tech or software as a service, the products are complicated. And so you likely have vendors who you need to brief, ideally, before you send the communication. This will enable customers to respond more efficiently and more effectively, as well as allow goodwill with the vendors so that they don't feel like they're getting sandbagged in the response effort.
With that, I would like to thank you. Hopefully the lessons that we have learned from our incident can help you prepare for an incident in your future. Thank you. We're happy to take questions.
So did the right thing and, and started informing people right away because that saves your brand more than anything. However, did you get any pushback from your legal team?
No, we actually didn't. They believed that we needed to go out and notify our customers as quickly as possible. Customers have various contractual obligations that they've set up with us of how quickly we have to notify them when there's a security issue. And also because we were taking an action that was going to impact those customers, that really was the driver for us getting out as quickly as possible on that Friday, because we had to take that action Friday. Like, that was the only way to contain the incident at that time, was to disconnect GitHub from Heroku, and that was going to break customers who may be pushing code into Heroku. So legal didn't have any pushback on it. Obviously, they were reviewing our communications, and they're an approver on all of our communications before they go out.
Thank you.
Yes?
I have a question for you, not related to the communication part, more on the incident response side. Since there's multiple parties involved, do you guys actually hire retainers or external incident response helping you doing the investigations? And how does both sides communicate between each other?
Yes.
You can share that.
Yep, yeah, so we do have incident response retainers. We actually have multiple because after we got nervous during some of the larger security events that if the entire world is impacted, probably the Mandiants and the CrowdStrikes and all the other breach response vendors out there are going to be a little busy, and I don't want to be told, sorry, we literally just don't have consultants at this time to help you. So we have multiple incident response retainers. And the way that it works, if you've never had to engage Mandiant or CrowdStrike, is you call them, you have an SLA established with that retainer, and then they don't necessarily come on site. Very rarely, I think, they actually go on customer site. They will just do everything. We would invite them in to our bridges. And so they literally are hearing everything that's going on. They're working hand in hand with Keith and his team. They are sharing information back via secure means. And it's more of they're part of our internal team. I don't know if you want to add anything about working with them.
Yeah, I think, obviously they won't talk about other customers, but one value aspect you get is, when you're Salesforce's internal incident response team, we're completely reactive. We can't go out and work on the coolest stuff. We just have to respond to what we have. And so we don't have all the data points. There's a lot of non-public data points out there. So sometimes they'll just provide some anecdotal point of, okay, well, maybe you should look here or something like that. Within the context of our incident, we're a pretty mature org. We're a big org. So what they helped us a lot with is they audited us, which really helped to kind of that end conclusion step. So we would perform an action, they would get the same evidence we did, we'd go through it and kind of try to assess it, and they would do the same. And so that's to give our legal team, our customers, our executive team assurance, both in our process that it's being vetted and also just that the infrastructure's actually safe and we're conducting a thorough investigation.
Hi. Also want to express thanks for talking about the situation, because it's really scary to talk about, and I'm really glad that you are here to tell us about this. You had mentioned with the engineers making sure they had time to sleep and do all these kinds of things so they don't have to constantly be on the clock helping you. And I'm wondering, with either the engineering team or your incident response team, how you dealt with the psychological safety of your team kind of after the fact. Once it was all said and done, you kind of tied a bow on it. How did you make sure that everybody was okay internally, not necessarily the outside comms, but within your own teams?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was something that we took very seriously during this incident. We knew going into probably that Thursday night, Friday, that this was going to go on probably for a while, and it was going to burn out a lot of people. I was very grateful that Keith didn't have to cancel his vacation and he was able to go away for a week or so, because he was literally probably burning both ends of the candle by the time he hit vacation. Our engineering, because Heroku is such a complicated environment, we did have to heavily rely on engineers that are not used to doing an incident, responding to an incident. And so we actually had, they had well-being monitors for them. So they had people that were just checking in on them and then telling them to go. They ended up, at the beginning, first week, we were probably burning them out a bit because my team is 24/7, the engineers are not 24/7. And so we got the feedback from the engineering leadership being like, look, we can't keep doing this. Like, we've done it for a week or two. Like, we need to do something because my team can't keep working the hours they are. So we ended up creating, they had an escalation path on their side. So they would work their typical hours. They would hand off to my incident response team regarding what actions that they could continue, my team could continue to take on our side while they were getting some rest. And then there was an escalation manager so that if something did happen when Heroku engineers were on their off hours, we could escalate to, we could wake up people via page and get them online. But that was, it did take us probably a week to get into that mode, and it was something that we were definitely monitoring. The executive leadership of Heroku was doing all hands with the team to try to make sure that they were monitoring the well-being of those employees as well.
Thank you again for sharing what you have. As you started the investigation and you started to peel the layers of the onion back, how did that investigation evolve, and how long did it take you from the time that you were notified to the time that you fully understood the scope of what everything was? And then the follow-up is, what things do you wish you had as you were going through this that you didn't have then?
Okay. So I guess I have to caveat everything by this doesn't have like a Hollywood ending. There's data points that are missing. A lot of it is speculation. We have specific data points that allude to the initial compromise for us actually being an upstream vendor compromise, and we couldn't prove it was a vendor. But there were multiple data points that supported that. So that was the first thing. And then on the other end of, I guess, that incident, we don't actually know what their ultimate objective was. We know a lot of the things that happened downstream of us. It's actually a very complicated incident, and I don't think we have enough time for that. But in its simplest form, they went from into Heroku to GitHub, and then we kind of lose some visibility, but then we think they cloned one of our customers' repos, got secrets from it, got into their network, and then they ultimately pivoted back into Salesforce with the pat to clone our source code. And so, there's a lot of data points there that we're missing. Like, GitHub won't tell us, okay, these are the customers that had their repos cloned, et cetera. So we don't ultimately know what they were after. We don't know if it was a crypto type attack or ransomware. We really just don't know. So that aspect is very unsatisfying from our perspective. From what we wish we knew, the threat actor was very sophisticated and patient. They took the time to learn very deliberately how Heroku worked, almost better than a lot of the people at Heroku understood, because a lot of the Heroku people were focused on their service, microservice, or just kind of like their niche of the app. And the actor took the time to learn all the aspects to move. And so we didn't have, well, we did have, but like that high level, like seeing the forest from the trees perspective that the actor took the time to have. We had maybe 5 people in the company who had that experience. And then, we get back into the kind of well-being perspective. So I guess to like make a deliberate answer to your question, it's having those kind of like subject matter experts who are generalists, who like understand enough where they can't maybe deploy code on the service, but they know like high level, okay, this is how things communicate and all of that, because that's what a threat actor has to do. They have to figure out how to move throughout everything.
And that, just to add on to, like, GitHub was a great partner in this, but they have their contractual obligations to their customers too. So they knew which of our customers' repos had been touched, but they couldn't tell us. So our hands were tied with, we couldn't go out to those customers and help them. So we literally were sending notifications being like, if you notice that you were impacted by this, please reach out to us so that we could get that additional information from those customers. So like Keith had said, it was a very complicated incident, and we were working with multiple Intel partners trying to piece this together because no one had seen this before.
Looking at this retrospectively, are there any things that you would do different?
Obviously, the communications.
I think the biggest thing for our team is we're just learning how we need to be more effective in our response function. In some senses, we kind of are Mandiant. Like we don't know everything about all of our companies. We might have some knowledge and disparate information. It might be very high level. So I think that's kind of like the main thing that we're kind of trying to mature to, is kind of standardizing that, even if it's just finding POCs. I think the first day or the second day, I asked on the leadership bridge, I'm like, I need someone who knows how this works. And ultimately I got that person, but like if we had that person documented, maybe we get there 6 hours earlier or something like that. So I think it's just, we're trying to figure out how we more effectively respond to these environments when there's so many of them, they're all unique. And once you get there, it's going to be a complicated response.
I think that's a good point. Salesforce, so our team is literally responsible for responding to all incidents across all Salesforce properties, whether it's Heroku, Tableau, Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, which is our, has a bunch of different acquisitions that have joined them. We're responsible for all those incidents. We're also responsible for the incidents that are occurring within our own like IT infrastructure. And one of the things that we've realized as we've grown, which we've grown significantly over my time at Salesforce, when I joined, we were about 15,000 employees. Now we're 77,000 plus and many more acquisitions, is that having a centralized team is good because we do standardize, like Keith said, when we bring in an acquisition, we're often uplifting what their incident response program was when they joined Salesforce. And so having a centralized capability allows us to make sure that we are maintaining that level of how we respond to security events and ensure, because any of those, an incident in Tableau could easily impact the Salesforce brand, which then impacts all of our brands that we have. So we're currently working on a model where we are looking to have specific subject matter experts for the various environments at the tier 3 level. Our tier 3 incident responders go and become, like Keith would become a subject matter expert for Heroku and really work with the engineers in Heroku to understand that environment so that if there is another incident there, he would be our lead incident responder there that could help guide the rest of the incident response team on how we should do the investigation based on that environment. Today, we have to leverage what we call environment contacts to really help educate us. We do the security investigation, but they're really educating us on the specific environment while we're responding.
So you said initially that after you made the initial response out to your customers, you started sending out daily updates. And I think that was probably the right move, but then you said that you received feedback from your customers saying that that was probably not the right way to do things. So what was the feedback mechanism that was available to your customers to get back to you with that feedback, and what was your threshold from your customers, or how many customers were complaining or giving that negative feedback before you just made that decision to be not on a daily basis?
Yep. So the feedback mechanism, Heroku is a little bit different than a lot of our other products, where Heroku at the time had free tier, or has free tier, meaning we had a lot of people that are not our typical large companies or small, medium companies. It's like high schoolers or whoever. So we're seeing a lot of that on social media and also in the press. But we also had support cases. Customers were opening up support cases, and we could hear the frustration through the feedback in the support cases. I think I had mentioned that it's not part of our standard playbook to do daily updates when we have a security event. It was our playbook says update when you have something meaningful to share or a customer needs to take action. And so we veered away from that, because we did have an executive that came in from, as part of the business unit. He felt adamantly about us having to post daily. And so, it's his business unit that was being impacted. and I took his advice and we did that. But he was pulling that from one of his previous companies that would do it. And so like it's not part of our typical playbook to continue to do that, and we'd not update our playbook to do daily status updates moving forward.
I think this is the last question.
You mentioned that you wanted to communicate more directly and that you left too much ambiguous for people to make their own interpretations. How did you take lessons away from this to learn to communicate more directly? What changes did you make to communicate more directly in future status updates?
Yeah, so on at the beginning of May, sorry, I think it's May 3rd, we published a blog where we laid out everything from the GitHub OAuth token getting compromised to why we were asking for passwords to be rotated. We should have done that post earlier. That post should have been done, not necessarily before we told customers to rotate their passwords, because we went and privately told customers to rotate their passwords before we posted it to the status site. But when we posted it to the status site after notifying customers, we should have done that blog post then. We should have laid out, this is why we're asking you to, this is how we connected the OAuth tokens to the passwords, so that they weren't sitting there wondering, wait, you just told me about GitHub, and now you're telling me my Heroku password needs to be rotated? I don't understand. So it was probably just doing that communication earlier would have been helpful, but for whatever reason, we didn't do it. And once we received the feedback from the customers that they were frustrated and we saw the criticism that we received, that's when we went and did the blog post to connect everything together.
All right, well, the speakers will be available for more questions if you all want to approach them afterwards, but let's give them another round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.